Hello, everyone. I am Coach Chris, and I'm going to go through the London Marathon 2024 course strategy and logistics. Here is a little bit about me. As you can tell from my accent, I am American. I will not pretend to be British, and so I will pronounce things with my American accent. I apologize in advance for that. I previously ran the London Marathon in October of 2021. That was when it was postponed to the fall for COVID. And I have been to London approximately 8 different times. I did a study abroad there actually in college. So that was a long time ago. I'm old, but I've been many times since then, including I was there last year. And I watched the marathon also in 2019. And so I have a pretty good history and understanding of the race. And this is also a little bit about me in terms of what kind of coach I am. And if you want to visit my website, there's obviously a lot more info there. But let's get into the race. Here is our agenda for the day. I'm going to cover the expo, the start, the course, the finish, and then I'm going to wrap things up with some pacing advice and a couple of tips on strategy for approaching this course. Here I'm going to start out just explaining a little bit about the tube or the London Underground. I live in New York, and so we call it the subway. And I may accidentally, at a couple of points, accidentally say subway. When I say that, I mean the tube. And I am, though, familiar with public transportation. I don't have a car, so that is something that I am quite familiar with. But one thing that is different for people who are, living in New York and are used to public transportation, or people who are coming from other places where public transportation isn't a thing at all, the London Tube does shut down overnight, and I have the hours listed here. There is a night service only on select lines. I think for the most part, since all of the people watching this presumably are going to be running the marathon, it doesn't really affect you. Probably you're not going to be out at 3 a.m., I would guess, if you're going to run a marathon. And so I'm really going to focus on things that impact marathoners and people that are coming to run the marathon. I'm not going to get into all the specifics on transportation. But the other thing to note, a couple of quirks. There is a peak and off-peak hours. The peak hours I have listed here, those are obviously when the prime commuting is occurring. Not surprising, nothing really new there. But one thing that's also different in terms of people, at least coming from New York, the tube has zones, and they are listed here on the map. You can't really see them, but for the most part, everybody who's running the marathon and who's traveling and sightseeing for the marathon, you're going to be primarily in zone 1, because that's where central London is, and that's where the majority of the major sites are going to be. Obviously, there are perhaps some exceptions to that, like if you have relatives or friends who, live elsewhere that you're staying with, you may be out in one of these further zones. But if you have booked a room near the finish, which is where I recommend booking a room, then you're going to be in zone 1 and really just traveling within zone 1. Here is the cost, and I have here the pay-as-you-go rates and what the cap is for the day. So this is how I personally have used the transit there. I just tap my contactless card. Apple Pay also works, and you just tap and go. If you take more than 3 rides in a single day, you will hit this daily cap, and that will then allow all the following rides after that, like ride 4, 5, 6, etc., that occur within the same day. Those will be free. Personally, I like this option because I do not have to plan anything out. I don't end up with extra money loaded on a transit card. But they do have these fare cards that you can put money on, and they have a visitor card for the Oyster card. The only thing to know about that is you have to pre-order it and have it delivered to your house before you leave. You cannot actually get this card in London itself. But there is a savings if you opt for this. Again, there's a couple of downsides in that you have to have done the pre-planning and have this delivered to your house. You have to load money on it. It's really most valuable if you're going to do a lot of traveling on the tube. So for instance, if you are staying near the finish and you're just going to walk to your hotel after the finish, then you may not even be on the tube that much that day. And if you're just coming in to run the race and then leave, again, these may be situations where you really don't get the value from this. The value obviously goes up the longer you're staying and the more things you're going to see, the more things you're going to do. So do keep all of that in mind, but I have the prices here and you can do your own calculations to determine what makes sense for you. All right, let's move on to the race itself. So we call it the Expo, so I have it here, the Expo, but they call it the running show. They're both the same in that it's exactly what you would expect an Expo to look like, just with a different name. The location for the Expo or the running show is this Excel London, and it will be located in halls N1 through N8. It's a very large convention hall, something that everyone's familiar with who's been to an expo before. And this London Marathon will be taking up the majority of the exposition halls there. So you won't have any trouble finding it. It's a really large expanse, tons of booths and all kinds of shopping opportunities that you're familiar with. You'll pick up your bib here, of course. There's the official merchandise provider, which is New Balance, and they have a very large store there that is quite well stocked in my experience. Lots of different colors of jackets and shirts and things. There's obviously other vendors that will show up. Most of the charity uh, operations will be set up there with their own booths, especially the larger ones. And then there's also a presentation stage. One thing to note, this is different than prior years, so I'm pointing this out. You will get your official event shirt at the expo, okay? And the volunteers there are going to give you the size that you had pre-reserved and registered for. If you don't like the size that you have opted for, then you have to make that exchange at the finish, okay? You cannot make the exchange at the expo. So what you'll want to do in that situation is make sure you pack your event shirt in your kit bag, and after the race is over, you'll have to take the shirt to the exchange at the finish there. So that is something that you really need to plan for, and this is different than the way the London Marathon has done the shirt in the past. All right, so there are some unique opportunities here at the running show, and I will point those out because I think London Marathon has one of the coolest expos out there. So let's look at what they have. They have Marathon Day printing on your shirt, and you just need to pay for this in advance. But it's a really cool option. It gives you your name printed in a really professional way on any top that you bring in. Again, you just have to pay for this in advance. They also have this thing that's called the Tumble Raider, and this is cool. I've seen this a couple times before. Basically, it is a giant treadmill that they can turn up to go really fast. So in previous years that I've seen it, they had this challenge where you would try to run it was at that time the world record pace, which was Kipchoge's world record and so I assume at this point it would be Kiptum's pace since he holds the world record at the moment. But they would see how long you could hold that pace for. And so it was a lot of people basically getting up there and falling on their face. And that's what you would do, because they would turn it up faster and faster and faster, and of course they wouldn't keep up. So for me, because I was running a marathon in a couple of days, I never actually get on this thing myself, but I am very happy to watch others get on and look very silly. Um, so use your judgment as to whether you want to take that plunge yourself, or if you just want to watch other people. But this is one of those cool things to see. They also will have shoe recycling, so if you have old pairs to bring, this is a place to donate them. They will have massages, which I think is great. There's 15 minutes or 30-minute options. These are first come, first serve, and there are the prices there. I would anticipate, especially on the weekend, that I would anticipate having lines, but it's a very good price and good option before your race. And there's also information and pacing advice available. One of the other cool things about the running show is this stage that they have. They call it Center Stage. These are the hosts. I am not familiar with these individuals. I presume that they are people known by the British public, but it's not names that I recognize. However, they do have some really cool panels, and they're going to have talks by coaches, nutrition experts, celebrities, and elite runners. There's a daily women's hour, which is brand new for this year. And then there's demos of the London Marathon app. I do know in terms of the elite runners, they have absolutely had panels with all of the runners that are running the London Marathon, and you can speak to them and meet them, ask them questions. So that's a really cool thing. The schedule for all of these talks are on the website. So you'll want to look that up if there's something in particular that you want to catch. So the dates and times for the expo, we're going to look at that. This is where the expo is located. As I said, Excel London. It's a little quote unquote far outside of central London. It's totally possible to get there on public transportation, but it's not something that you're going to walk to within central location of your hotel. So the times are Wednesday 10 to 8, Thursday 10 to 8, Friday 10 to 8, Saturday 8:30 to 5:30. But in terms of expos, this is one of the majors that has the most hours and the most days available. So lots of opportunities to go. Make sure when you go, you bring your ID, and you will also need your registration email that has that QR code in it. They have already sent these out. I got mine already, but if you haven't received it yet, they have claimed that they'll still be sending them up until Friday, April 12th. So there is a chance that possibly a couple of people haven't gotten theirs yet. Someone else can pick up your event pack for you. This is, again, another one of those things that's really unique about the London Marathon. There are a couple of stipulations on how that goes, in that you have to have a letter from that person saying that you are allowed to pick it up, and you must also have a copy of their ID. In addition to that, you can only pick up one other person's, right? So you can't say, oh, well, it's going to be, we're going to send one person and they're going to pick up all 5 event packs for, my club of 5 people. That is not an option. And, it can't be, oh, I'm going to send, my husband to get my cousin, my brother, and all of that, right? Just one additional packet per person. So there are a couple of restrictions, but really the fact that they let you do it at all is kind of impressive as far as the majors go. We're going to look at the travel directions now, because as I said, it is a little bit outside of central London in terms of walking distance and things. The best way to get there, and I did this in 2021 was take the Elizabeth line. There is also the Docklands Light Rail station. There's two stops that are very close here. There's Customs House stop from the west, and then there's the Woolwich, that's a tongue twister, or Prince Regent stop from the east. You can see those there on the map. I've highlighted them for you. It's less than a 2-minute walk from either of these stops, so really pretty convenient. There is also this IFS cable car, which is a 10-minute ride. I did this after I picked up my stuff for the expo in 2021, just because it was fun and it was scenic. You got a cool view of the city from this cable car. It wasn't really efficient in terms of time or where I was going, but if you want to get some cool sights, that's one way to do so. I do recommend going as soon as you can. If you are traveling in and you're only arriving on Friday, then of course you don't have an option to go any sooner than that. But if you're someone who's arriving on Wednesday or Thursday, even if your plane is landing in the morning or the afternoon, I recommend, just forcing yourself to get to the expo on that day as soon as possible. It will be very crowded, especially the later you go. And so, you can save yourself a little bit of time and a little bit of headache by getting this chore out of the way, either on Wednesday or Thursday, if that's an option for you. So as I mentioned, there is this Elizabeth line, and this is a new line that opened. And so I'm going to point this out because if you haven't been to London recently, you weren't able to take this. It didn't exist. But it is quite fast. So if you hop on this Elizabeth line, it's 20 minutes from Paddington Station to the Excel London Custom House stop. And this also is a line that goes out to Heathrow. So if you are arriving to Heathrow, this is an option you will probably want to take advantage of. It skips a lot of the intermediate stops, so it's rather an express train option. And so really do consider this if you are traveling to either Heathrow or Excel House from central London. All right, so the timeline for race day, there's the elite wheelchair racers. They're going to go off at 8:50. The elite women are going to go off at 9. Then you have the elite men going off at 9:40, with the masses starting between 10 a.m. and 11:30 a.m. The London Marathon has not given any additional specifics in terms of the full schedule layout. However, they have emailed everybody to say what your specific start time is. And they have also said that they are going to space the waves out with small gaps to allow some room for the roadways to clear. It's a good thing because these roads are quite crowded, especially early on, and I'll go through that in more detail later. So this is what the bib looks like, and there are 3 different start lines for this race. Those are blue, green, and red, and there are 4 different assembly areas. Those are blue, green, red, and yellow. Your bib is going to indicate what those colors are, and you will also have that information in your email with your confirmation code and your start time. That information is also available on the app. So if you haven't gotten the app, I do recommend you download that because it's going to give you that information really quickly. In terms of getting to the start, they do recommend 3 different tube stops based on which assembly area you are assigned to. Those stops are Blackheath, Maze Hill, and Greenwich. And I'm going to show you a map that it gives you the layout for where those are. But do know that you may be going to a different tube stop than someone else who is also running the race. The start and waves are based on your predicted finish time. The championship entries are all assigned to blue, and those finishing over 7 hours are all assigned to green. As I understand it, this has been a change with the way they have distributed the starts and the waves, in that Good for Age used to have their own assigned start and wave, and they have decided instead to spread those out based on the times. And so I think that will lead to a better flow, in that all the people that are aiming for a faster time, say 3 hours, they'll all be ahead of people who are aiming for like a 3:30 or a 3:50, something like that. I suppose we'll see how this goes, right? Do note that you get free transit with your bib on race day all the way up until 6:30 p.m. And the only thing you need to do for that is show your bib. So that's super convenient. You don't have to worry about carrying any extra cards around with you on race day. You can just put your bib and pin it to you and make sure you show that. This is not available to any of your friends or spectators or family, right? So it's really only free for you. So if you have people with you, they will have to pay. But I think this is a really nice gesture on the part of London Marathon. This is that map that I was talking about. This is where the start area, this is the layout for it. This is where each of these assembly areas are. And you can see here what the recommendation is, and also how long the walk is from each of these stations. But basically, the blue, they recommend you go to Blackheath, and this is the walk that you will take. Green, they recommend you get off at Maze Hill and you walk down that path to your assembly area. Red, they recommend you go to Greenwich and you can walk in this direction, or there's another option for red, which is to go get off at Maze Hill and you'll enter from the other side. For yellow, they also recommend you follow the path that leads past the blue, but from Blackheath. Well, one thing I want to say about this, do note that each of these tube stations is a walk from the assembly area. So make sure you give yourself plenty of time for all of that, right? Especially if you're someone like me who has never been to Greenwich before and who's going to get off the tube and be like, where am I and what's going on? The good thing is there'll be thousands of people also going the same way as you, so you don't necessarily have to know the exact route. You just have to get yourself to the right place. And then from there, you're going to be able to ask. There's going to be signs. There's going to be barricades and guides all around, also volunteers. But do make sure you give yourself time for all of this to occur, right? Don't plan your tube journey to arrive at Maze Hill, for example, when you should be in your assembly area. You need to give yourself a buffer for all of this. A couple more notes about the start. So all of these assembly areas are for participants only, and they do check this. They're going to look at your bib before they let you enter. So you're not going to be able to hang out with someone else if they're not assigned to your assembly area. You're also not going to be able to hang out with your family or friends before the race. You have to really do this on your own or with others that are assigned to the same spot as you. You can't change your assembly area. They won't allow it. You can, they've basically already stated that plain as day. If you ask, they're going to say no, but you can move back within your same assembly area. You can move back to a later corral or a later wave, but you can't change colors and you can't change to an earlier wave. You do want to dress in multiple layers, things that you're going to really just throw away or toss to the side. All of these items will be donated to charity, so you don't have to worry too much about the waste factor for that. But you really want to have enough to be warm whilst you sit outside in Greenwich Park for, an hour and a half. Things that go over your running clothes, things long sleeves, sweats, jackets, parkas, things like that. All these items that you're going to ultimately wear for an hour or two and then get rid of. You definitely want to bring something to sit on. This whole area, Greenwich Park, is grass, and it could be wet or muddy. It's very likely that it will be. A couple of things that I have brought are simple foldable things like garbage bags, just large sheets of plastic, or the heat shield, those the heat shield that you get at the end of a race. I have a bunch of those saved up, and I use them at future races. So you can bring that to sit on. It folds up. It'll be, pocket sized. You can just stuff it in your pocket and then pull it out to sit on the grass. You don't want to probably spend the entire hour plus standing, but there will definitely be some standing whilst you wait in line for the porta potties and those types of things. And also getting between the assembly area and the corral lineup and all of those kinds of things. There is a lot of standing, but when you have the option, it's good to rest your legs and sit. One thing I want to point out, just because I think it's cool, and again, this is a new thing and a thing I've not seen at other races, but they have female urinals available at the London Marathon. And supposedly this is very fast, and they have a lot of them. So that should help with the lines, which I think is great. And in my experience in the past, the lines for the marathon were not too bad, especially for the earlier waves and corrals, which I was in. And so I benefited from the fact of there not being everybody there yet. But the lines went pretty quickly for a major. And if this is a cool thing and a workable thing, then they should go even faster, which is great. So they call this the kit bag check. We call it gear check, but they're the same thing, nothing different, just a different name for it. This is the official bag. You're going to get it at the expo. They're going to give it to you. You have to use this bag. It is clear. It's very large. There's a drawstring, really sturdy. You need to attach your sticker to it. They're going to also give you that at the expo. That's so you can find it later and pick it up later. There will be an assigned lorry. A lorry is a truck, basically. So you're going to take your bag to the truck, and they're going to put it on the truck and then take it to the finish for you, where you can pick it up at the end of the race. Your assigned lorry will, and all of this information with your sticker, that's all in email. It's also written on your bib in case you forget, and it's on these stickers as well. So you won't have any problems with this. Just look for the numbers and the lorry when you arrive. As I said, all of these items will be transported to the finish for you, and you will be able to pick it up there. So there's the things I recommend you pack are certainly some warm clothes, some different layers. It's also recommended that you pack a recovery snack. I really think everybody should do this. There is no food given at the end of the London Marathon. They have stated this. And it is one of those things that is definitely different for people who are used to racing in the US, in that we always expect food at the end of the race. And for a lot of the races, we expect like a giant spread, but this will include nothing. You're going to get water and Gatorade. So if you want food, and I do recommend having something to eat as soon as possible, you need to put it in this bag for yourself. Here's a couple of pictures of what this start area looks like. So as you can see, and as I mentioned, there's signs everywhere. Once you get out to Greenwich, Um, this is feels very different than London proper. It's, small homes and residential area. The roads are quiet, but there's barricades and signs all over telling you which way to go, so you don't have to worry too much. Do really give yourself plenty of time. You're going to have a lot of walking to do on this morning. You're also going to presumably want to use the toilets at least once, maybe even twice. So you're going to need time to queue and use it, and then possibly queue and use it again. And then also, you want time to drop your kit bag, your gear off prior to having to line up for the corrals. So all of this adds up. There are signs everywhere. This is what some of the signs look like. You're not going to have any problems really, because there's going to be thousands of people all going in the same direction as you. And you just have to, you can look at their bibs and see the color and just follow those colors, right? So red, just whoever has red, follow that person. You do really want to make yourself comfortable. This is a picture of what some of those toilet lines look like. Obviously, you can see there's a lot of people, right? And it is a grass field. So as I mentioned, when you have the opportunity to sit down, I do recommend taking the time to be off of your legs and off of your feet while you wait. We're going to get into the course now. This is an overview of the map. You will run by several landmarks, and these are some of the major ones for people, as I said, who are not British, or who are sort of really only aware of the highlights. There's obviously Buckingham Palace, which everyone knows, Cutty Sark, which I had never heard of until I had run this marathon, but it is one of the absolute coolest parts of the race. Once you do this, you're going to remember this forever. There's the Tower Bridge. I think a lot of people have heard of it, but you get to run across it, and it is also one of the real highlights of the race. And then you also go through the Canary Wharf section. So the course is point to point. You start in Blackheath and you travel to Westminster. You run primarily north and west, but this race changes direction multiple times. So you're going to go in every direction, north, south, east, and west. But in terms of wind direction and avoiding a headwind, that's overall running north and overall west. The course is marked every single mile, and there also are course markings at every 5K. Lots of markers well marked. There are aid stations with this Buxton mineral water. It's at mile 3, and then from 4 to 24, it's every 2 miles. A little less frequent than we're used to at some of the larger marathons here in the US, where they are every mile, but that's okay. 2 miles is good. They also have this, I'm probably going to pronounce this incorrectly, Lucozade Sport drink. It's at mile 9, 15, 21, and 23. And then they have the same brand gels at mile 14 and mile 19. And the flavor for these is orange. So I didn't take any of this. I didn't try it. I don't try it. I bring my own. I use also electrolyte caplets, so I don't drink any of the sports drink on course, and I use my own gels. But if you are going to try any of this, I do recommend you get some before race day itself, so you know what it tastes like, and so you know that your stomach is not going to reject it. This is a close-up of the elevation profile. I'm going to go through it in more detail, but the good thing about this course is there's not a lot of elevation, so we don't have to go into too much with that, which is nice. All right, here's a comparison between the other 5 majors. This is all of the courses lined up, and you can see, obviously, at a glance, which ones have more hills. New York and Boston have the largest gain between them, 810 feet and 815 feet, so roughly equal. And again, you can see that pretty clearly just at a glance. London gains approximately 419 feet, so half. And that's not bad for 26.2 miles, really. Overall, we consider this course flat. There are some small climbs, and they are spread out and dispersed and relatively small, so not too bad in terms of things that are going to slow you down, which is great. This is a look at the aid stations. As I said, there are toilets. They are located at every mile from 1 to 24. So a lot of options for that. This I just thought this was cool. So I'm sharing this. They're going to have sanitary products for women. They're actually going to have pads and tampons located at all of the drink stations. So I've never heard of this before, and it's very different, at least from an American point of view. I think it's really great. So I'm just pointing that out because I read that and I was like, wow. The water, I really want everybody to, again, if you're coming from the US, this is not something we're used to. The water will be in bottles, and that's plastic. So you're gonna, it doesn't crumple under your feet. And that's something you want to be aware of because sometimes people throw them in the middle of the street and sometimes people kick them and sometimes you're dodging them, you're trying to jump over them or you're being pelted by them accidentally, right? But it is certainly, it can definitely be a hazard. And as I said, in the US, we don't do plastic bottles like this, so it's not something that we are accustomed to. And I remember this being really alarming to me. um, for the marathon's part, they really want everybody to drink the bottle and put it to the side and put it in the garbage. But of course, when there's thousands of people and there's the chaos of the aid stations and people are trying to just go and move through quickly, people don't always follow those guidelines and they just like take one sip and then toss it, right beside them into this mass of people in the middle of the street. So again, you want to watch your feet going through all of these stations and you really want to be careful. I don't want anyone to fall or get tripped up. The drink, as I said, is going to be flavored orange and it will be in compostable cups. So that is not a concern in terms of projectiles. That is, again, what we're used to in that if it does land in the middle of the street, you can squash it underfoot, right? A paper is not going to launch itself off of your foot, which is good. Another thing, this is brand new for this year. There is going to be a water refill station at mile 15. Again, a lot of unique things about this race. For this race, you are allowed to wear a hydration vest. And for New York or Boston, that is not allowed at all. So if you want to carry your own hydration and refill it at that one stop, you can. You can refill it even from the bottles at multiple stops, right? But they have this new station set up specifically for refills, which I think is great. And they really are encouraging people to have their own water vessel that they can reuse. It could be a handheld, it could be bottles on the belt that you wear, or it could be the vest or the bladder. Really, a lot of options here And this is one of those things that just is really unique about the London Marathon. I will share a couple of facts and tips and some pictures. So this is what those clocks look like. They're going to be alongside all of the course markers, which is nice. Keep track of where you are on course. If you put your name on your shirt or your bib, you're going to have people cheering for you the entire time. The crowds for the London Marathon are amazing. I will say, I'll just tell a little story here. So my name is spelled atypically. It's a weird spelling. And so I had my name, my full name, which is Kristen, I had it across my singlet. And because it is a weird spelling and because I'm American and they're, British, they really pronounce my name massively wrong. But I could tell they were cheering for me because it was close enough. The first part was right, and then the last part was wrong. But I felt supported and amazing the entire race. And I knew that the spectators were really trying to motivate me, even if it wasn't quite the pronunciation for my name. But I do recommend this for everyone. It feels really cool. Everyone should be aware there are some weird things that occur in the roadways. And again, I think this might be something that is just a thing about like being American and coming over. And I'm not used to the way that the roads are designed there. I'm sure if you live there, you travel on these roads every single day of your life, um, you're accustomed to how they're set up and where there may be raised curbs in the middle or bollards or things like barriers or obstacles. You're probably familiar with all of that and you probably don't bat an eye at it. But for someone else, for someone like me, I remember being very surprised by this at multiple places in the course. And because the course is crowded, I do remember having a couple of little mini panics when I thought, oh my God, I really have to move. I'm going to run right into this curb and I have to move like right now. And there's a lot of people around me. So I have a couple of pictures of what these look like. If you really want to avoid them completely and you really don't even want to think about this at all, then you can choose to run towards the sides and you won't have to worry about trying to deal with it being in the middle. But I'll show you what these look like. There is a dashed blue line. This is the going to mark the shortest distance. We call it the tangent line. This is the measured and certified distance of the course of 26.2 miles. You can see a picture there of what it looks like. It's just dashed, but it'll run the entire way from start to finish. It is really too crowded in a lot of places on this course to run the tangent line. You can see in this picture here an example of what it looks like. It's wall-to-wall people. There are exceptions to that, of course, right? Like if you're in the very front and you're the very fastest, you're going to have fewer people. If you're towards the very back and on the slower end of things, you're going to have fewer people, right? But every single person that's all in the middle there, it's a lot of jamming up. And again, they have really tried to manage that with spacing the waves and the corrals out and also lining people up with their predicted finish times. But it's just a big race and there's some areas where the streets are small. So even though the tangent line will be out there, you're probably most likely not going to be able to run on it. Even if you want to, you just will not have that option because there's going to be 50 people in between you and the tangent line. And there's only so much energy that's worth expending to push people, elbow people, fight your way to get on the line. Energy needs to come from somewhere. I would personally spend it trying to run and not worry about where you are on the roadway. But again, you're going to have to use your judgment in the moment to see what space there is and how things fall. Another one of those really cool things about the London Marathon. This is one of my favorite parts. So they call it fancy dress. We would probably just call it costumes, but whatever you call it, it is people dressed up in the most unique, bizarre in some cases, um, really outlandish, over the top outfits. And so here's some examples here. You're going to see even crazier. Like I didn't take pictures, I didn't include pictures of the craziest ones. I want you to be surprised, but look around you and you're going to see people running. They're running, mind you, in all of these things. And the really cool thing is almost all of these people are running for some kind of charity. So they're really out there for a good cause. And I think that's awesome. Okay. The PACE team. So they have not outlined exactly who is on the PACE team for this year, for 2024, but they have all of the data and the stats for last year on the website. So I put that here. So the finish times, they are dispersed every 5 minutes between 3 hours and 4:15. Then from 4:20 to 4:40, they're at 10-minute intervals. From 4:45 to 7:30, they're at 15-minute intervals. They have also stated there are going to be people, they've called them tail walkers, which is a new thing for me. But they're going to be, we call them usually the sweepers, course sweepers, but they're going to travel at an 8-hour marathon, and that's sort of the official cutoff for the race, 8 hours. They have said that at least in 2023, there were 130 pacers. They are spread out between each start and each wave, but a whole ton of people, amazingly, all running at tons of different paces. They're going to have these giant flags, which you can see in the picture here. It's actually a backpack, and this giant flag is attached to it, but you really won't be able to miss them. And ideally, the way these are lined up and set up is that whatever your predicted finish time, say you're going for 3:10, you are assigned to the wave and the start that the 3:10 pacer is going to be in, because you are aiming to run 3:10, right? So that's the way these are laid out. I'm sure eventually they're going to post the exact assignments with their names, because they have that for 2023. It just hasn't gone up for 2024 yet. So check the website for this. Okay, now I'm going to go through the course in detail, breaking it down into sections. I have basically taken it in 10K sections because, as I stated earlier when I was going through the elevation, there's not a whole lot of elevation here. So 10K sections. The start to the first 10K, this is in Blackheath. One of the most complicated parts of this race is actually the different starts and the different start lines. So the green start is going to merge with the blue just before mile 1. Then at around mile 3, actually right before mile 3, there's going to be where the red and the blue merge together. A thing to know about this merging point is it's chaotic. In that people are coming different speeds, different directions, and they're joining together, right? So you can think about it like cars on the highway, right? Like when they're all coming together, there's a little bit of a jockeying, right, for space. Again, it's not gonna, it's, seconds, right? Everything is gonna occur in, 5 seconds is gonna be over. But in that moment, it is a little bit chaotic. So really make sure at this point you keep your head on a swivel. You're aware of what's going on around you, right? You may have to slow down or speed up a little bit just to allow the people around you to filter in together. There is a small climb in the beginning, very small, 20 feet over 1.2 miles. You can see that there on the map. And then it basically immediately follows with a downhill, and that's a 100-foot drop over 1.5 miles. I remember this drop. It is a visual. You can see the drop ahead of you. It's really early in the race, and so none of these things should affect your race ultimately. You should just be in the first, 2 or 3 miles of the race. You should just be getting into your race pace without a lot of stress. But a little bit of elevation change here in the beginning. The streets are really narrow, and that is one of the reasons they have the different starts actually, is because these streets are so small in this section. And you do want to watch for the obstacles here. This is really one of those parts where the majority of the obstacles are, because again, you are on residential small streets where there are more of these curb cutouts and different directional things in the middle of the road. And I do have pictures. I will show you what some of these look like. So at mile 2.72, that's when you make, if you're following the red, that's when you make the left, and that's when the roadway widens. So the road widens at the merge point where everybody's coming together. It will all make sense in the moment, but again, it's just a little bit of like okay, let me make sure I know where I am and make sure I get my spot in the crowd and on the road. Here are some pictures. So this is what I was saying. These are two examples of those medians that are in the center of the road and where you are running. Again, there's street lights, there's midway curb points where pedestrians would normally stand and wait, right? I think this is one of those things where everybody else is probably used to it because I'm coming from a different country, it's like, whoa, what's happening? It's not a big deal. It will, maybe slow you down for, 5 seconds. If you have to momentarily slow down a little bit to move over. But if you really want to avoid it completely, you can just hug to either side, and then you don't have to worry about any of that stuff in the middle until you get very much way later in the race and you're running on big wide roads that don't have any of this. Okay, we're on to the next. So I've taken the 10K to the half, and basically this is Cutty Sark to Tower Bridge. And as I mentioned before, these are two of the major highlights of the race. In my opinion, I just love these sections. So you're going to remember this for those highlights specifically. At mile 6.3, that's when you make this right and you head out towards the river, and you really just make a loop right around Cutty Sark. I have a picture of it, but it's a giant ship. That's what it is. If you don't know what it is. The crowds here are huge, like 6 deep, 10 deep. It's wall to wall crowds here. Everybody's going to get really excited. The runners are going to get excited. The spectators are going to get excited. You need to be careful to not overdo it in this section, because it's very easy to just let all of that excitement make you go 20 seconds faster, and you don't want to speed up that much this early in the race. Okay, so you're heading then through Greenwich and Surrey Quay. You are basically on a 2-lane road through this section. So wider than the residential streets, which are like 1-lane road. These you've now expanded to a 2-lane road. There is a small climb as you approach Tower Bridge, it's about 50 feet. It's not huge. You can see it there on the map in the bottom, this little bump up as you're going towards Tower Bridge. The halfway point is actually on the north side of the Thames. And so once you get across the Tower Bridge, a little ways past that, like 400 meters, that's when you're going to cross the halfway point of the race. And you have all of that excitement of crossing the Tower Bridge to really push you past the half. You're not even going to notice that you've crossed the half because you have all of this energy pumping you up to get across the bridge. So these are the pictures of those two sites that I mentioned. And you can't exactly see the Cutty Sark in this picture, but you're going to run right by it. And this is the approach to it. So you can see the masts and everything way in the distance before you reach it. You do want to make sure you are careful in this area. As I said, one of the things to know about the crowds is they are so deep and they are so energized that sometimes they will poke out a little bit. And again, it's not in a bad way necessarily, but they're like reaching out. They're trying to see their runner coming down. They're trying to see past the people, right? Or they're trying to reach out and like high five you as you go by, right? But they're like bent over the barricades, so they're sticking out a little bit. And so you may want to just edge in a little bit here rather than try to run all the way up against the barricades. Again, just because there's so many people, it's really a crush of people at these two sites in particular. Okay, we're past the half now. We're into Canary Wharf and we're going to go all the way up to mile 20. I have this area circled here and the elevation there highlighted on the bottom as well. So in this section, right after the bridge, what I always look forward to is trying to see the elites and all the faster runners that are heading back. They're heading towards the finish while you're heading out. You're going to go right by them on this roadway with no real large dividers between, so you can see them clearly. And I always use that energy and to motivate me as I'm going along. I also like to, cheer them on and like, yeah, way to go, things like that. At mile 15, you're going to go under this tunnel, and you're going to go in this tunnel, sorry, and it's under what's called West Ferry Circus. So I bring this up because when I ran this course the first time, I had no idea where I was going or what I was doing. All of a sudden, I was just running along and I'm like, I'm in a tunnel. Why am I in a tunnel in the middle of London? So it's not long, it's not anything, but you're outside and then you're inside. Your watch is going to do wacky, wacky, wacky things at this point. You're enclosed on all sides. And you don't have the natural light. So if you have sunglasses on at this point, you may want to take them off because it becomes really hard to see. Like, at least when I did it before, it was like bright light and then very dim. I was like, whoa, I can't see. So again, just to know at mile 15, this is going to occur. There are tons of twists and turns in this section. You can see it there on the map. I mean, you're just this away and that away. The roads are turning. You're, making lefts and rights every, mile or so. You're just making another turn. So this is a section where you're not gonna, it's not a long straightaway. It's not a place where you're just going to, zone out and just run. You're going to have to really pay attention to which way you're turning and which way you're going, and make sure you're pacing this correctly in this section. There are a few tiny undulations here. There's nothing big, nothing really notable, but you can see them on the map, right? It's like there's a little bump. It's so momentary and so small that it's not worth pointing out individually, but there will be a couple of points where you're like, oh, I'm just going up and down again. Here are a couple of pictures from this, and I did mention this before in going in the tunnel that your GPS will do wacky things. In this section, you can see from these pictures here, there's also a lot of high rises and skyscrapers around you. And so because of those buildings and obstructions, your GPS might also be affected by that. There's also a couple of overpass areas that you run under and within. So you are, partly enclosed, like enclosed on one or two sides for some sections. And again, all of these things affect your GPS. So I'm going to go through some things about GPS in the end, but this is a section where you want to know and you want to kind of plan for what am I going to do if my watch is giving me wacky things. All right, we are up to this last 10K, and this you are in Westminster. So past mile 20, you're going to make a left and you're going to head towards London proper. The London that, all of us are familiar with, and it's on movies and TV and in the books and all of that stuff, right? And you're going to finish there right next to Buckingham Palace. But as you're heading back, you're going to realize you're heading back because you're going to start to see all of these things that you're familiar with or the sites that you have, previously gone to visit in your sightseeing part of the trip, right? So you're going to be like, oh, I recognize that. Tower of London. I went and visited that. At mile 21 and a half to almost 23, this is when you are now on the east, going west while the other people are going out. So you're coming back. So you're seeing them on the way, as you did before in the reverse. And again, this is one of those sections where I just like it. I make a point of trying to cheer those people. Again, like if you have your name on your shirt or you see people with their name on their shirt, I try to cheer them. Hopefully they're cheering me. And it's one of those things where we're all just kind of lifting each other up together. And I just try to say, hey, yeah, way to go, good job, and all of those, looking good, all these things that you say, right, in the race. Here again is another section, a sort of longer section at mile 24. This is called the Blackfriars Underpass, where your watch is likely to malfunction. It's going to do one of those things, if you look at your map afterwards, where it's all squiggly. It looks like you ran through the buildings or you ran through the Thames like you were swimming. This is one of those points where your watch and your map are likely to do that. So once you get past that, you're at mile 24.5 and you're going to be running right there along the Thames River, and you're going to see the river beside you. It's going to be on your left. It's all of those views. It's really pretty, and you're also going to know at that point you're getting close, which is great because at that point in the race, everybody's tired and they just want to be done, right? There are a few small climbs in here. They're primarily 20 to 30 feet, which is not really noteworthy, except for the fact that you're doing these climbs at, mile 25 and mile 26, and any climb at any point that far into the race seems really hard. It seems really, like Everest or something. It's not. It's just you're so tired from all the miles that you've put on prior to arriving there, right? Here are some of the scenic highlights in these pictures. I personally love the London Eye. I just think it's really cool. You're going to see that at mile 25. You're going to pass by Big Ben. I don't have the picture of it here, but you know what it looks like. You're going to see that at mile 25.8. In this section, again, you are on the waterfront, this embankment area, and there's really no protection at all. You're not surrounded by anything. You're just out in the open and exposed. So if there is a headwind, this is a place where you may feel it, and you just want to make sure you can tuck in or things like that. Hopefully it's a tailwind or no wind, that's fine too. But if this is a section, if you get to this point and there are strong winds, this is the section where you're going to know it. The finish. It's such a, I can't say enough good things about this race. It's a really incredible experience, and the finish is amazing as well. So I have a picture. This is what the medal has looked like. We have no idea what this year's medal will look like. I'm waiting impatiently, like everyone else. But they usually have really cool medals. And then, of course, here is a picture of Kiptum finishing and winning. Unfortunately, he has passed, but I think he will always be remembered for this. And you can see there behind him Buckingham Palace, which you run right by before you finish. One of the things I really tell all my runners that I coach and everybody is you want to try to speed up and start the recovery process as soon as you finish. That means in this case, you want to eat carbs and protein. The ratio recommended is 4-to-1. And you also want to make sure you drink, and you need water and electrolytes. And you want to really replace everything that you've lost as soon as possible so that your body can start the recovery process, right? So you've emptied everything out of your body. You've used all of its nutrients, glycogen stores. You're probably close to at least somewhat dehydrated, right? And so to aid in recovery and really get the ball rolling, you want to get all of these things in as soon as possible. Here is a map of the finish. The finisher chute is 800 meters. It's a secured area. There is no public access to that area. That orange arrow on the map there shows you the finisher's chute and the direction that you will be running. Not running, sorry. At that point, you're finished. You're walking. There are changing rooms available at the end, within the finisher's area. There are 3 different genders for that assigned. And then there is also a family support area, which is also available at the finish. And so a lot of really great things here for people who want to, get out of their sweaty, probably wet clothes at this point and put on something dry and warm. And if you're someone who has small children, you have a place for them to meet you. And while you're changing and getting yourself settled, you have a place for them nearby, which is also really nice, I think. This is the designated meet and greet area. You're going to see they'll have large signs by letter telling people which area to go to. So presumably the way it's designed is you set it up by your name. So like last name Smith, so I would go to S. And they're spread out and designated, right? Personally, I try to avoid these meeting areas because they're usually crowded and there's a lot of people there and you have to deal with security and all of these things. And I prefer to meet people away from the crowds. But if you don't want to do that, this is an option. The one thing to note, well, 2 things to note. 100% you want to plan in advance. Don't leave it up to chance and don't say, oh, well, I'll just text you when I get done or something like that. The phone may not work at all just because there's so many people, thousands of people all in this teeny tiny area. So you may not be able to connect. You may not get service. You don't want to have that as the only thing you're relying on. You want to just pre-establish, like, I'm going to meet you at Trafalgar Square, which is right there, etc. You know, there's a big lion thing, you know, I'll meet you there. You know, that kind of thing, landmarks, but you have pre-established where you're going to meet. So there are here these designated public crossing points. If you are staying to the south here, like your hotel is to the south of St. James Park, you will have to cross one of these. If you have family coming to meet you at the finish, they're going to cross one of these, right? These are steps, like it's a gantry, and so people have to go, and not in every location, but in several of these. So they have to go up and over across the street. So you may want to avoid those if you have just run the marathon. You may not want to go up over those, in which case you have other options. There's plenty of places to disperse and go around, right? You might have to walk a little bit further, but at least you don't have to go up steps. I usually choose walking further than steps in most situations after having run a marathon. There are multiple, I put subway stations. That should be tube stations here. I have them highlighted. You can go in multiple directions. You know, if you live outside of London, you know, you can connect very easily from the finish to wherever you need to go. Again, it's in every direction, north, south, east, west, any direction you want to go in, there all of the options are here. So a very easy place to get to and from in terms of your transit for the rest of the day. Okay, now I'm just going to explain a little bit about pacing and sort of overall strategy. I'm going to give some tips about how GPS works and what to do with your watch, because as I mentioned, it's probably going to show you some weird things. So I want to help you with that. But overall, I really tell everybody to pace by effort. And so if you're within a range, there's a little bit of ups and there's a little bit of downs, and that's normal, right? Because most of us don't run like machines on a treadmill where, like, say if you're targeting an 8-minute mile, in a 3:30 finish, you're not going to have every split be exactly 8, right? You're going to have like a 8:02 and a 7:58 and, you know, maybe an 8:05 and maybe a 7:55. But hopefully it's not, for this marathon in particular for London, it doesn't need to be a huge range, like a 30-second plus or minus. If you run or have run like a New York City or a Boston, you will have a very wide pace range because of how drastic some those ups and downs are, but London is not like that. So a range, but a small range. And this is basically it, right? The climbs are a little over, descents are a little under, and you should average marathon pace for the entire race. That's the goal, right? GPS. So everybody loves our watches. I love watches. Um, I'm I've been at this long enough that when I started, watches weren't as much of a thing as they are now. And so when I started out, I really learned to not rely on them. But there's a couple of things that everybody should know about them. One thing I just want to point out, sometimes people don't have a conceptual idea of what GPS is or how it works. But GPS is based off of satellites, and the satellites orbit Earth. If you are using a cell phone or an Apple Watch, then it is operating off of cell phone towers. But in any case, either of those technologies, it's not an on the ground thing, right? It's not like following you for every step. And so it is subject to interference. And in fact, your GPS can be inaccurate, and the longer you're out there, and other environmental factors lead to greater inaccuracy, right? So the major things, and just to say, I have pulled this from the Garmin website, right? These are not like I didn't type this. I took screenshots from the Garmin website in terms of their tech specs and their help information explaining how these devices work and how the technology works. So the inaccuracies are caused by a couple of things, but one is this concept called GPS drift. I'm going to explain what that is. Another one is environmental factors. All of this leads to inaccuracy, right? So all of these numbers are close. These numbers are within the ballpark, but these numbers are not 100%. What is GPS drift? So GPS drift is the difference between your actual location, where you physically are, and where your watch thinks you are. So there is some variance between these two, right? This is the accuracy. It is 3 meters for 95% of the time. So, but 3 meters is 10 feet. And, that's relatively small. 95% of the time is a large majority of the time, right? But again, it's not 100%. So, as I was saying, the longer you're out there, the more this can start to add up. And basically, if you are actually in the center of that target, there are points where your watch thinks you're as much as 10 feet off, right? So your watch thinks you're all the way at the edge of that bullseye. And this difference of 10 feet can certainly start to add up over time, especially a 26.2-mile race. You're out there for several hours, right? So a 10-foot difference multiplied over time and distance can really start to add up. So the other thing I mentioned, environmental factors, this is GPS interference. So a couple of examples of interference, these are caused by things around you, right? The surroundings. Some of these examples are tall buildings and large groups of people. There's also dense tree cover. But in the London Marathon, there's a lot of these first two. And those tall buildings I mentioned are in a lot of that Canary Wharf section. Large groups of people, that's the entire race, basically. And as I did mention, there's a couple of points where you're literally inside a tunnel enclosed on all sides. So obviously the signal that's coming from the satellites that are orbiting through space, are having some trouble reaching you through your to your watch when trying to go through various structures and deflection points. That's where the interference comes in, right? So what is the solution? There is a way around this, and that is to not use your pace and distance as the 100% accurate at all point measure. Instead, you can use elapsed time and course markers. So this is an example I have here, a perfect example of what I think everybody's watch screen should look like. But most important on here for this story that I'm pointing out, or this method of pacing that I'm pointing out, is having the elapsed time on your watch face. How does this work? Well, actually, I'm going to go, before I go into how to use that, I'm going to show what I recommend having. I'm going to go into what I recommend having on your screen. And I recommend having this in a single screen so you're not trying to scroll through things. But these are current pace, distance, the time, elapsed time, and then the average pace. But keep in mind that if your distance is wrong, then your average pace is wrong, right? So a lot of times, oftentimes, what happens is your watch is going to over count the distance. So when you finish the race, it's going to say 26.4 miles or 26.5 miles even instead of 26.2 miles. And when the distance is over calculated, it's going to then say that your pace was faster than what you actually have run, right? Because what matters for your time and your pace is actually what your chip time is, and it's not what your watch says. So if, for example, you're shooting for a 3:30 marathon finish, that's an 8-minute mile pace. But if your watch is going to say 26.4 miles when you finish, your average pace is going to actually want to be something more like 7:55 according to your watch, because that is going to actually translate to 8 minutes a mile for your chip time. Now, all of this is really confusing, and again, that's why I recommend you just use elapsed time and the course markers, rather than try to do all of this math in your head and try to figure out how much over distance your watch is measuring, right? So one of the easiest ways to do this is to have a pace band that tells you what time you're supposed to be at each of the mile markers. And you can print these out. You can write these down. I personally, what I usually do is I make a little note card for myself, and I laminate it. I put tape all over it so it's sweat proof, and I have it in my pocket, and I just pull it out and I say, okay, I'm crossing mile marker 10 on the course, and it's saying using this example. Oh, I should be at mile 10 in 1 hour 34 minutes and 30 seconds. Okay, what does my watch say my time is? How much off am I on that? And usually, hopefully, if I'm having a good day, um, I'm just a couple of seconds off, right? Two to 3 seconds off, something like that, very manageable, right? But you go along through the course using the on-course markers and the measured distance, which is correct, and the time that you're supposed to be there based on your goal. There are some watch apps that do this for you where you press the lap button, and I have also used that. There's some advanced pacing strategies you can use, right? Where, like, if you wanted to plan to run a negative split race, where you can put all of this information in and have your watch set up to pace you through all of that. And they have apps for this where you just program all of this in advance and your watch is telling you, and you hit the lap timer and it's adjusting for all of that stuff. You can do all of these things. And if you're a person who's like into the tech and is not scared of apps and all of these things, then do that. I recommend that. But if you're a person that just wants to go old school and basic, this method works. Literally, paper, pen, write your times down. You can write it on your arm if you want, and the timer on your watch. That's it. It could not be more simple, but that can guarantee you your finish. You come in on your chip time exactly where you want to be. And the reason something like this is super important, it's not super important if you're just like, I just want to have fun. I just want to finish strong. I just want to, enjoy the race. You don't need to even worry about this. But if you're a person that's like, I want to BQ and I need to hit this time to qualify, you need to hit this exactly, right? You don't want to get to the finish and go, oh, shoot, I was 30 seconds over because my watch was telling me I was running faster than I actually was. And with this course in particular, with those points where the GPS is very likely to go completely off, it may tell you things like you're going 4 minutes, you're running a 4-minute mile, you're running a 12-minute mile, you're running a 3:30 mile, you're running a 15-minute mile. It's going to jump all over at various places when the GPS is really wacky in those specific locations. In particular, you do not want to be in a jam where you're trying to figure out and do math and trying to figure out what your watch is saying or where you're supposed to be if you're shooting for a time. So really think about this, spend a little bit of time studying this, writing things down, getting those pace band numbers. You can find any of this available online. Literally just search, you know, target, 3:30 marathon pacing. And there's a whole ton of websites that'll give you all of these numbers. That is the end. Thank you for joining me. If you have additional questions, you are free to email me here. You can comment on this YouTube. I do review it. I do answer it. I will be in London this year. My second London Marathon. I'm really excited. I'm going to run this 6 days after Boston. So I will be one of those people that's out to have a good time. And I'm not going to be stressing about what my pace is. But I really love this race. I think it's an amazing experience. And I really think that, everybody that comes over is going to enjoy it if you're coming over from the US or other parts abroad. And I think that covers it. All right. Have a great race, everybody.